I was scrolling through Craigslist late at night looking for a good deal on a used camera. I didn't need anything fancy, just something functional. That's when I saw it. Almost new camera, great condition, urgent sale, cheap. The price was unbelievably low, almost suspiciously so. But what caught my attention even more was the description. Just one odd line at the end. Come pick it up now. Just don't look at the last pictures. I stared at the words for a moment. Something about them unsettled me. But curiosity always got the best of me, and I reasoned that maybe it was just a joke. People wrote weird things on Craigslist all the time. I decided to message the seller. The response was almost immediate. Come right now, cash only. I hesitated. Most people at least asked a few questions before agreeing to meet up. I glanced at the time. 11:47 p.m. Maybe I should wait until morning. But then again, what if someone else bought it first? It was a ridiculously good deal. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my jacket, stuffed some cash into my pocket, and headed out. The address led me to an ordinary suburban neighborhood. Rows of identical houses, perfectly trimmed lawns, and warm porch lights glowing against the night. But when I reached the house from the listing, something felt off. It was completely dark. No lights inside, no cars in the driveway. It looked abandoned. I parked across the street and checked the address again. This was the place. I sat there for a moment, debating whether I should just turn around and leave. But then I noticed something. The front door was slightly open. Not wide, just a crack, like someone had forgotten to close it all the way. A creeping unease settled into my stomach, but I told myself it was fine. Maybe the seller had stepped out for a moment. Maybe they had left the door open for me on purpose, expecting me to just take the camera and leave the money behind. Still, I didn't move right away. I watched the house, half expecting someone to appear in one of the windows. But nothing happened. The longer I sat there, the more I convinced myself I was just being paranoid. I took a deep breath and stepped out of my car. The air was cold, unnaturally so for this time of year. I shivered as I approached the door. I hesitated before knocking, my knuckles hovering over the wood. The silence was thick, pressing against my ears. "Hello?" I called. No answer. I pushed the door open slightly. The hallway beyond was dimly lit by the moonlight filtering through a window. The inside of the house smelled like dust and something faintly metallic. And there, just a few feet inside, sitting on a small wooden table, was the camera. It was positioned almost too perfectly, like it had been placed there deliberately for me to find. Something about it felt wrong. I stepped inside, just enough to reach for it. My fingers brushed against the cold surface, and as soon as I picked it up, I felt the weight of it in my hands. It was heavier than I expected. Brand new, sleek, no scratches. A ridiculously good deal. But then I noticed something that sent a chill through me. The memory card was still inside, and I remembered the message. Just don't look at the last pictures. I stood there, staring at the camera in my hands, feeling the pull of curiosity gnawing at me. What was on it? I told myself it didn't matter. I could just take it and go. Forget about the weird listing, the empty house, the strange instructions. But my fingers were already moving, already flipping through the settings, already accessing the gallery. As the screen flickered to life, I felt the unmistakable sensation that I was being watched. And then, the first picture loaded. I held the camera in my hands, its weight sinking into my palms as my thumb hovered over the preview button. The seller's message echoed in my head. Just don't look at the last pictures. But how could I not? My breath slowed as I pressed the button. The screen flickered to life, showing the most recent photos taken. The first image was nothing unusual, an empty living room, dimly lit, with old furniture covered in white sheets. Dust particles hovered in the air, illuminated by a single shaft of moonlight from a window. The place looked abandoned. I tapped to the next image. A long, dark hallway. Doors on either side. Shadows clinging to the corners. Something about the perspective felt off, as if the person taking the picture had been in a hurry. Another tap. The next photo was taken from a low angle, showing a staircase leading to the second floor. The railing cast jagged shadows along the wall, stretching like fingers toward the ceiling. I could almost hear the silence pressing in. Then, the fourth image. I hesitated. It was another shot of the staircase, but this time, something had changed. A figure stood at the top. I squinted, trying to make out the details. The image was grainy, but the figure was unmistakable. Tall, unnaturally thin, its face obscured by darkness. It wasn't moving, just standing there, barely visible in the dim light. My throat tightened. I flipped to the next photo. Now the figure was closer. It had moved down the stairs. It was halfway down now, still standing completely still shrouded in shadow. But the shape of its head seemed wrong, too tall, too stretched. I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. Tap. Another picture. Now it was at the bottom of the stairs. I could see its body more clearly. Long arms hanging limply at its sides, fingers that seemed too sharp, too pointed. Its head was tilted slightly as if listening. A chill ran down my spine. Tap. The next photo made my stomach drop. It was standing in the hallway now, closer. I could make out the vague shape of a face, but it was featureless, just a pale blur where eyes and a mouth should be. Tap. The final image. My breath caught in my throat. It was standing right outside the room where the picture was taken. The door frame was in the foreground. The figure loomed just beyond it. And then I realized the room in the photo was the one I was standing in right now. A cold, electric fear crawled up my spine. My skin prickled. I wasn't alone in the house. I heard it before I saw it. A slow, deliberate creak from the hallway. My body locked up, my fingers clenched around the camera. The air felt heavier, like the walls were pressing in. Then, another creak, this time closer. I turned my head, barely daring to breathe. And then I saw it. A shape, standing in the darkness just beyond the doorway. Watching me, I couldn't move. The shape in the hallway was barely visible in the shadows, but I knew it was there. Watching. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the light. A coat rack, a reflection, anything but what I thought it was. But then it shifted. A slow, unnatural tilt of the head. My breath caught in my throat. I clutched the camera in my hands, my fingers trembling against the cold plastic. The screen was still on, still displaying that last photo, the one where the figure stood right outside this very room. I didn't dare look away. My pulse pounded in my ears. I had to get out. Now I took a slow step backward. The floor creaked beneath me, a whisper of sound that felt deafening in the silence. The figure moved. Not a step, not a lunge, just a sudden shift, like a shadow bending in the wrong direction. I swallowed hard, my mind screaming at me to run. But my body felt like it was sinking, as if the air around me had thickened, weighing me down. I needed to look away from the screen. I needed to face it. With every ounce of willpower, I forced my eyes up. And the hallway was empty. The figure was gone. A cold dread coiled in my stomach. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. I wasn't stupid. Just because I couldn't see it didn't mean it wasn't there. Move. Move now. I spun on my heel, nearly tripping over my own feet as I bolted for the door. The wooden floor groaned beneath me with each frantic step. My breath was ragged, my fingers fumbling for the doorknob. Locked. What? Number? No, it wasn't locked when I came in. I yanked at it harder, the old wood rattling in the frame. The knob twisted but wouldn't budge. Behind me, a whisper of movement. I didn't turn around. I slammed my fist against the door, panic rising like bile in my throat. Open. Open. Then, something cold brushed against the back of my neck. Every hair on my body stood on end, my muscles seized. A slow, creeping chill spread from where I'd felt it, like ice slipping beneath my skin. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Then a voice. Low. Wrong. Right behind me. You looked. A sharp, sudden force shoved me forward. I crashed into the door. My shoulder screamed in pain, but I barely registered it. The door flew open, and I stumbled onto the porch, hitting the cold concrete. For a moment, the world was spinning. My vision blurred. My lungs burned as I gasped for air. Then I scrambled to my feet and ran. I didn't look back. Not until I was in my car, door slammed shut, hands shaking as I shoved the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. My headlights flicked on and illuminated the house. The front door was closed. The hallway inside was dark, empty, just like before. No figure, no sign that anyone had ever been there at all. Except, the camera was still in my hands. The screen was black now, the battery dead. But when I turned it over, I saw something that made my stomach lurch. The memory card slot was empty. I hadn't removed it, but someone had. Or something. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. The house in front of me was still, lifeless, like nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. The camera sat on the passenger seat, its screen dark, battery dead. The memory card was missing. My heart pounded against my ribs as I tried to process what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Had I hallucinated the whole thing? I could still feel it. The icy touch on my neck. The voice. Low. Distorted. Impossible. You looked? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My body screamed at me to drive, to get as far away as possible. But my hands wouldn't move. Because deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Something was wrong. I forced myself to breathe, forced my fingers to unclench from the wheel. Slowly, my shaking hand reached for the camera. As soon as I touched it, a jolt of cold shot up my arm. My skin prickled. I didn't want to turn it on, but I had to. I pressed the power button. Nothing. Dead. I exhaled sharply, a small relief settling in my chest. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever had happened in that house, whatever I had seen, was stuck there. Then, from the corner of my eye, movement. My head snapped up. The rearview mirror. At first, I saw nothing but the dark street behind me, empty and still. But then, a shadow shifted. A shape standing beneath the street lamp. My pulse slammed into my throat. It was the figure, tall, unnaturally thin, watching. But something was different now. It was closer. I blinked, my breath catching, and in that single instant, it was gone. Not faded, not walked away, just gone. A suffocating silence filled the car. My chest was tight, my lungs refusing to expand. I needed to leave. Now my shaking fingers found the gear shift. I threw the car into drive, pressing the gas pedal so hard the tires screeched against the pavement. The house vanished in my rearview mirror as I sped down the empty street. I didn't slow down, didn't look back. But the whole time, I could feel it. That heavy, suffocating presence, like something was still watching, like something had followed me. I drove faster than I ever had before, the night blurring past me in streaks of empty streets and ghostly streetlights. My fingers ached from gripping the wheel too tightly, but I couldn't let go. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, expecting to see it again. But the street behind me was empty. Had it really been there? Had I imagined it? I wasn't imagining anything. The cold sensation lingering on my skin, the missing memory card, the way the air felt heavier, wrong. All of it was real. Something had followed me. I didn't stop driving until I reached my apartment complex. I pulled into the lot, breathing hard, my hands shaking as I cut the engine. Everything was quiet. No movement. No shadowy figures standing beneath flickering streetlights. But I still couldn't shake the feeling. That suffocating presence. I grabbed the camera from the passenger seat and stepped out. The parking lot felt too empty, as if the world had stopped moving around me. The air was thick, heavy, pressing against my skin. I hurried inside. My apartment door slammed shut behind me, the lock clicking into place. I let out a slow, shaky breath and leaned against the door, trying to calm my racing heart. I was safe. At least that's what I told myself. But the moment I stepped into my darkened apartment, I knew something was wrong. The air was too still, too silent, like something was waiting. I turned on every light I could, flooding the small space with warm, artificial glow. The camera sat on my kitchen counter, dark and lifeless. I couldn't leave it alone. I needed to know. Grabbing a charging cable, I plugged it in. The red charging light flickered on, and then, before I could stop myself, I powered it up. The screen flickered. A single message appeared. No images found. I stared. Number that wasn't right. There had been photos. The empty house, the dark hallway, the thing standing at the top of the stairs. I had seen them, but now, nothing. Like they had never existed. I clicked through the menus, searching, my breath catching in my throat. The storage was empty. And then, a soft sound. Not from the camera. From somewhere inside my apartment. A whisper of movement. A shift in the air. I froze. I wasn't alone. Silence pressed in around me. I stood frozen in my apartment, my heart hammering against my ribs. The camera sat on the kitchen counter, its screen glowing faintly, taunting me with its emptiness. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it. A presence, heavy, suffocating, lurking just beyond my field of vision. Something had followed me home. Slowly, painfully, I turned my head toward the hallway. It was dark. Too dark. My apartment wasn't big. Just a kitchen, a living area, a short hallway leading to my bedroom and bathroom. But now it felt like that hallway stretched on forever, the shadows deeper than they should have been. And then, a shape, barely visible in the dim light. Tall. Too tall. It didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I knew it was watching me. I swallowed, my throat dry, my limbs locked in place. Then, the light flickered. For a split second, the entire apartment plunged into darkness. When the light came back on, it was closer. A strangled gasp caught in my throat. It still wasn't moving, but now it stood just at the edge of the kitchen, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its arms hung limply at its sides, too long, too thin, and I still couldn't see its face. The air grew colder. My breath came out in short, shallow bursts. Run. Run now. I took a shaky step backward, my foot barely making a sound against the floor. The light flickered again. Darkness. My pulse slammed into my ears. My fingers dug into the counter. When the light flickered back, it was right in front of me. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over a chair. A choking sound clawed its way out of my throat. It didn't move, didn't reach for me. But I felt it. That cold, creeping presence, sinking into my skin, curling around my bones. And then, in a voice that wasn't a voice, in a whisper that wasn't a whisper, it spoke. You shouldn't have looked. The lights went out. This time they didn't come back on. Darkness swallowed the apartment. The lights didn't flicker back on this time. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick, suffocating, pressing down on me like a weight. I wasn't alone. I knew I wasn't alone. The silence stretched, unnatural, oppressive. And then, a sound. Not loud, not sudden, but close. A slow, deliberate creak of the floorboards. I forced my body to stay still, every muscle locked in place, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might explode. Then, another step. It was moving. I swallowed hard, fighting the panic clawing up my throat. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Right there in the dark, watching, waiting. A cold breath brushed against my face. My body finally obeyed. I ran. I didn't think, didn't hesitate, just bolted down the hallway, fumbling blindly in the dark. My shoulders slammed into the doorframe, pain shooting down my arm, but I didn't stop. My bedroom. Get to the bedroom. My hands found the door. I yanked it open, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. Silence. My breath came in ragged gasps. I pressed my back against the door, my palms slick with sweat. Then, something scratched against the wood. Not nails, not fingers. Something else. Slow, deliberate, testing the surface. I bit my lip, swallowing a whimper. Then, a whisper. "You can't run." The doorknob twisted. My stomach lurched. I threw my entire weight against the door, gripping the handle with both hands, forcing it closed. Another twist. Harder this time. My fingers burned from holding on so tightly. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to stop. And then, silence. I held my breath. Nothing. No scratching. No twisting. No whispering. Just an empty, suffocating stillness. For a long time, I didn't move. Then, with shaking fingers, I reached for my phone. The screen flickered to life. 3:12 a.m. I held it up, using the faint glow to scan the room. Everything looked normal. I exhaled sharply. Maybe it was gone. And then, my phone buzzed. A notification. One new image. I didn't take it. With trembling hands, I opened the gallery. And froze. It was a picture of me, sitting in my room, taken from inside the closet. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. The photo was grainy, dimly lit, but there was no mistaking it. It was me, sitting on my bed, holding my phone. Right now. And the picture had been taken from inside the closet. A slow, crawling dread seeped into my bones. My pulse pounded in my ears, every instinct screaming at me to move, to run. I forced myself to look up. The closet door was open. Just a sliver, a black void beyond. I gripped my phone so hard my knuckles ached. The dim glow of the screen barely pushed back the darkness. The air felt thick, suffocating. Something was in there, watching me, waiting. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I wanted to look away, to shut my eyes and pretend I hadn't seen the picture, pretend that none of this was happening. But I couldn't, because I knew, if I looked away, if I blinked, it would be closer. I swallowed hard, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My free hand inched toward the bedside lamp. If I could just turn on the light. A soft creak. The closet door moved. Not much, just an inch. But it moved. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. My fingers finally wrapped around the lamp switch. I twisted it. Click. Nothing. The light didn't turn on. A sharp, icy panic shot through me. I twisted it again. Click, click, click. Still nothing. Then, a whisper. Too close. Put it down. The voice was wrong, twisted, like something trying to mimic speech but not quite understanding how. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My phone screen flickered. Another photo appeared. I felt my heart stop. It was me again, but this time I wasn't alone. A shape loomed behind me, just a shadow in the dim light. Tall, wrong, its head tilted, its arms hanging at its sides, standing right behind me. I felt it before I saw it. A presence, a weight in the air, cold breath against my neck. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Then the phone screen went black. The phone screen went black. For a moment, the world stopped. No sound, no breath, just a thick, suffocating stillness pressing against my chest. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Something was behind me. I felt it, the weight of its presence, the cold air wrapping around my skin, the whisper of movement, slow, deliberate. Then, a quiet, shuddering breath that wasn't mine, right against my ear. My body locked. Every nerve screamed for me to run, but my limbs wouldn't move. Then, the mattress shifted. The faintest pressure, barely there but undeniable, like something had just sat down behind me. A sharp, nauseating dread coiled in my stomach. I clenched my jaw, my fingers curling into fists against the sheets. Don't look. Don't move. Don't breathe. A cold, heavy silence stretched between us. Then, a sound, software rhythmic. Click, click, click. My breath hitched. It took me a second to place it. The camera. The shutter was going off. Something was taking pictures. The clicks came faster now, erratic, desperate, capturing frame after frame in the dark. I couldn't stop myself. I looked. My phone screen flickered back on. A new photo appeared. My stomach dropped. It was me, from behind. The angle was all wrong, taken from just inches away, my own back, hunched forward in fear. And behind me, a figure. Its face was wrong, a blur where features should be, a hollow, gaping absence of a mouth. Too many fingers curling over my shoulder. I gasped. The air shifted. A whisper, so close it burned. Now you see. The lights exploded back on. I spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. My breath came in sharp, panicked gasps. My skin was ice cold, my fingers still trembling. I grabbed the camera, nearly knocking it off the bed. The screen was still on. My gallery was full. Hundreds of new photos. I flipped through them with shaking hands. They were all the same. Mr. sitting on my bed. And behind me, that thing. Each image, it got closer, until the very last photo. Just a black screen, or number not black. I squinted, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't just darkness, it was a face, pressed against the lens, watching me, waiting. The camera slipped from my hands. It hit the floor with a dull thud, but I barely noticed. My mind was stuck on the last image. That face, pressed too close to the lens, watching me, waiting. The air in the room was heavy, thick with something unseen. I could feel it, curling around me, pressing against my skin. I wasn't alone, not anymore. I forced myself to move, to do something. My phone. I grabbed it with shaking hands, swiping at the screen, trying to call someone, anyone. No signal. A static hum filled the air, faint at first, then growing. The camera screen flickered. The gallery opened by itself. New photos. They were being taken right now, one by one. My breath hitched as I watched the images appear. First, the empty room. Then, a shape. Blurred. In the corner. Next photo. Closer. I couldn't move. Next photo. Right behind me. A whisper slithered through the air, so close it might have been inside my head. You belong to me now. The lights went out. The last thing I saw was my own reflection in the camera screen and something smiling behind me. Then, click. Darkness. The next morning, the apartment was found empty. The door was locked. Nothing disturbed, nothing missing, except for me. But the camera was still there, and on it, one last photo. A dark, featureless face, staring out from the screen, waiting for the next person to look.